And welcome. We are back. This is the Bottomless Podcast. If you are tuning in, thank you. We are honored. If you're a return listener, we are especially honored. If this is your first time, welcome. We hope you. If this is your first time, we are incredibly honored. We hope you stay.
We missed you.
We missed you, and we hope you stick around, and we hope you enjoy a little bit of the subject matter. So for anyone who is maybe first time or just listening, we'll just go again a little bit into. We're just three friends. Brown people, and we're doing a podcast. And so my name is Kevin Ortiz, and you guys are.
My name is Leslie.
Young Lil V Vincent. And I'm black, not brown. Get it straight.
Vince goes by Lil V, aka Lil PP, aka all right. So to give, whether you're a return listener or a first time listener, let's jump right into it. To give anyone who is listening or watching a little background into who we are. So there we were. Oh. Christmas of 20, I think 12, 13, 14, somewhere in the early teens.
2011.
Christmas of 2011. Leslie has invited myself and Vince and friends from North Carolina to New Jersey.
Because I had just moved to New Jersey for my senior year of high school.
Correct.
After having been here.
Oh, wow. You were in high school. Love this. Throwback.
Caveat. Leslie is currently in Hawaii. I am in Floribama, Panhandle, Florida. Vince is in California, Los Angeles. And so that's like our regional separation right now. But at the time, me and Vince were in North Carolina, where Leslie at one point lived. She moved to New Jersey for her high school. And so she's now inviting her friends, myself and Vince and others, to come visit her on Christmas. Through a series of unfortunate events, Vince ends up driving to New Jersey, which was the reason.
Well, to be clear, his mom thought I wasn't trusted to drive him up the East Coast, up I-95. And to be fair, she was exactly correct. But because of that, he flew, I think, somewhere near Princeton up in Jersey, and we were supposed to go pick him up from the airport and then drive like the rest of the way to Leslie's parents' house.
Well, okay, so yeah. So through a series, but basically my saying series of unfortunate events was I didn't want to say my mommy wouldn't let me drive over it. So through a series of unfortunate events, there we are. Vince is driving up the East Coast to New Jersey, and I'm on a plane because my mom is bugging. She Asian.
That's so extra. I forgot that. Why?
Girl, I was livid. So there we are. I'm on the plane. Vince is in the car, and so get the airport, and I'm like, nah, I got this. I can get my way to Leslie's house. So I start doing the whole like, let me look for the train. And mind you, I learned you can put directions into Google Maps and say which route of transit you're taking, whether it's train, bus, car, walking, and it'll give you directions. And I had Google Maps at the time. I didn't know you could do
that
this.
Back in 2011.
Maybe not. I mean, I had an iPhone, and I'm sure the Google Maps app was on there. But so in my head, I'm like, there had to have been ways. But this is literally, I'm in a city I've never been in before, at an airport I've never been in before. As a kid, I'd been in cities where I like took subways, but it was always someone else who knew where to go, what to do, which trains connect. I didn't. So there I am. I go up to a random ticket kiosk, and it's literally like, when you're clicking through, maybe your computer's having troubleshooting issues, and you just think this tab and these settings this is what I'm doing at this ticket kiosk for a train ticket. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I can figure this out. Get a ticket. Get on it. There's like sets of stairways going down to different platforms. I think I just pick a stairway, go down to the platform, and I start looking, and I go, yeah, whatever train shows up, this will be the train. So there I am. So there I am on the train. And I'm looking, and I'm like, I know the name of Leslie City, so I'm just gonna wait for that one to show up on the little like digital sign that's at the front of my cabin. God. So all of a sudden, stop after stop comes, and I hear, after a while, if the train has a dead end, it'll tell you 2 more stops until the end. So I'm sitting there, and eventually it goes, this is the current stop coming up. The next stop is such and such city, and that's the last stop. And no matter what stop you're going to, by that stop, you will be getting, it's like an announcement on, you will be getting off this train.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh,
We've
shit.
all been there.
I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, wait, back up a little bit. The way I got on this train, the first train that I was on, at one random ass point, again, this is like complete, there's no logic. There's no, one train that I was on, I just randomly get off on a stop because everyone else got off. I passed right through a little gateway onto another train, and that's how I'm on this train. I swear to God. Looking back now, I was like,
he was trusting that group thing would be the vehicle that took him straight to your house.
Oh my God.
It's following the crowd.
In my mind, I'm like, now 29-year-old Kevin, thinking about like 18, 19-year-old Kevin, or however old I was like, motherfucker, this isn't Target. You can't just start walking down aisles and assume you'll find what you're looking for. This is fucking new. But at the time, I was like, nah, I got this. So I'm finally on the second train that gets to the last station. Then I asked like one of the ladies, like the people who work the trains, like, hey, like, is this city gonna come up? And she's like, no, that city's the last city, and then you got to get off. And I was like, shit. So that's my mind. I'm like, So my mom's texting me, yo, you good? Yo, you all right? Everything straight? And I'm like, nah, lady, you fucked me up because now I'm lost because you wouldn't let me go with Vince.
You better blame your mom. Also, I think your mom had given you printed out directions, if I'm remembering correctly.
So cute.
So I get off at the last stop. I'm freaking the fuck out. I've taken the train for maybe a strong 45 minutes to an hour.
And it's cold, right? Like
it's cold. It's cold. I
Jersey.
got my jacket on and shit. I got my pea coat. It's cold. I take a train. I took a train 45 minutes from a New Jersey airport to God knows where. So I just get off at a stop. It's late at night, and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, all right, we'll figure this out. My phone's about to die. I run up, plug my phone into a wall, and charger. It's like, it's New Jersey, so like people ain't talking to you. People ain't making eye contact. The cop that I tried to ask for help was like looking at me like I was like trying to take his money. Motherfucker was like, I was like, come on, just help. So eventually I plug my phone in, and I'm like, all right, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna call Vince. So I go, but I need to know where I am. I go, excuse me, officer. I go, what city is what city am I in? He tells me whatever he tells me. And I go, all right, Gucci. Vince, you know this city, right? He's like, is that, wait, what? I was like, I got on some trains and I'm lost and I don't. He was so through Vince, however the fuck Vince rerouted his GPS, somehow was like, Vince basically did all the navigating. He was like, I think
I think the original plan was that you're supposed to land somewhere, maybe like an hour from Leslie's, take the train. It was going to take you pretty close, and then maybe we pick you up there, or maybe her family. Like it was something like very convenient. But what turned out to happen is that as we were driving up the East Coast, not even close to Leslie's yet, we had to redirect to find where Kevin was, to scoop him up, and then continue our journey up to Leslie's parents.
Dog, I think I was like, I might have been somewhere near like Princeton, New Jersey, some popular university. Vince figured it out, and then literally, I'm just like a helpless, like, if like your dog, when your dog, if you have a dog and it gets too hungry because you haven't fed it, it just sits down in front of you and stares at you and like starts whimpering because like it doesn't have any intelligence or ability to like figure out how to like help itself at that moment. I was just sitting there and I was like, I just gotta, my lifeline is Vince. And then thankfully like Vince like literally, like I guess he literally knew just how to put pieces together and make sense of it and be like, all right, okay, that's train station, this city. I think you're near here. All right, stay right there. I'll come get you. And then like, sure enough, I'm standing out front and like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. I see his red Mazda pull up and
flying out on his horse.
To be fair, I think I didn't mind because I was enjoying the drive. So to me, it was just like the scenic route. I think Kevin had all the energy of stress and anxiety, and I was just living my best little vacation life.
I feel like that is the Venn diagram. Like that is the heavy overlap between us three, is that both Kevin and I are horrendous, or I don't know if you've gotten better, Kevin. I've actually gotten a bit better, but are just like horrendous at navigation and directions in the physical world. Like so truly bad. I remember one time I think it was once I had started driving. Do you remember, Vince? I called you. It was the same type of situation where I think I was like trying to get somewhere, and you were like, "Well, where are you? Are you on such and such road?" Is that really? I can't even remember the
On the
name.
All-American
Yes, and I was
in
like,
Fayetteville on the freeway, the only freeway in this little town, mind you. This is like a little suburban town with
sure.
one major freeway that cuts through the town.
It was like, what? How do you not know? But so yeah, that right there. I
Oh
empathize
God.
with Kevin in that story.
Yeah.
Wait, on the note of like your mom not trusting me to drive, which was probably a good call, were your parents the ones that like always had to drive you to your friends and like talk to the parents for like an hour? Because my parents refused to let me, even until I was like a teenager, like they had to meet their parents and like run a background check, like do like
1000.
a prayer walk around the house. Like it was, and I was always so irritated and embarrassed.
My mom, yeah.
Stop that. Because I feel like I didn't meet your parents until way later.
Well, by the time like I started going to the church that we all met at, actually, I was like maybe 16. So by that point, I had started to earn some favor, and I was hanging out with quote unquote church kids. Little do they know that they were you ratchets, but they had a bit more. They were a bit more trusting in that context.
Yeah. I think my parents stopped that when I finally got a car. Like I was like later in high school. My mom was like, all right, he's doing whatever he's doing. I can't really like control that.
It was more so for me, like if there were gonna be any boys. Like I remember one time I tried to go to the movies in like a group setting in high school, and my dad was literally like, "Who all is in this group?" Because I was like, "With the group," and he looked at me. I remember if I ended up being able to go. I think I did, but yeah,
Yo, shout out to Asian fathers.
true.
Asian parents don't play. Asian parents don't play no shit. Like,
So true. No, me and Elise are actually just reminiscing. The most classic phrase that we can remember, you know, your plans are going downhill, is when an Asian dad says, "Let me think about it."
oh, yes, no,
Get that, like, it's like early in the weekend. It's like a Friday night, and you're like, "Hey, can I spend the night at my friend's house Saturday night? We'll go to church together in the morning." Da da da. And he like leans back on the couch and like rests his hand on the arm, and it's like, "Let me think about it." And then
That's
you
a
have to
fact.
follow up every 2 hours.
That's a fact. I think in their mind, they either want you to not to forget it. It's like to let it
They
go.
want you to give up, or
They want, or they want to like, they want to somehow soften the blow of being like, no, you're not going
or
to
they
know.
just want you to work so hard for them to finally say yes, that you're just like so grateful by the time they say yes that you don't ask again for another 3 weeks. Yeah.
Oh God. Well, speaking of church, let's get into our actual reason why we're here. So, a little background history. I'm Christian. I'm still plugged into a church. I'm still actively involved, engaged, tithe, even though I shouldn't have to. Attend, serve, give, XYZ, volunteer of my time.
Come on,
And then,
resume.
if you guys want to, but we don't have to. You guys don't have to get into it. If you guys want to get into it, maybe in inserts.
I'm not a part of the church. I'm, in all intents and purposes, an atheist. But with obviously the bulk of my first 2.5 decades on Earth, I was part of the church. So a lot of ties and friends still a part of the church, but it doesn't apply to me.
Same. And I'd say I've more recently left the church than Vince.
Okay, so
For context.
Yeah, for sure. So let me preface what I'm going to get into. I give my background because I don't want anyone here thinking that I'm some sort of outsider throwing rocks, or that even these two are outsiders throwing rocks. I give that background. I get these are in some ways like it's not like we're entirely like you said, friends or still people you love and care for, still in these communities and church and Christian people. So that's my background. And let me also just lead into this. Kevin Ortiz personally believes, and this is not like some like banner statement that I'm just like spitting out. This is like to me, when the church and her people behave the way they're supposed to in society, which in my opinion is to come into a culture.
And you mean supposed to according to the Bible?
Yeah. So like my plain reading of the Bible, like looking, I think this is how I see it, looking at Jesus and going, he came in, he wasn't trying to accrue political influence. He wasn't trying to like overturn governments. He came in and he went, number one, he went straight for a very specific ethnic group because there was a promise given to that ethnic group. And then once he established that precedence of, I'm giving you first dibs on what I'm doing here, in conjunction, he went for the marginalized of society, the oppressed of society, the downtrodden, the grief-stricken, the sorrowful, the people, the fatherless, the orphan, the widow. And so I think the church's first agenda, for me, the church's first agenda is to come into a society, kind of like there's a part of the, and I think it's Isaiah and I think it's Babylon, where God tells the people of God, hey, seek the welfare of the city you're living in. It's a secular city. They don't serve God. Seek their it might have been Jeremiah in the book of Jeremiah. Seek their welfare, because in the welfare of the city, you'll find your welfare. So I think that, in my personal opinion, the church is to come alongside and be a part of the culture, a part of the context, but not vie for power, not vie for political sway, not come in and try to be some sort of authority figure. As a matter of fact, I think in terms of authority, the church only has and only is supposed to have authority and judgment and like policing amongst their own. So this whole like looking at secular, so that's my stance. But I think when the church is
and
behaving
when
like
you're talking about church, you're talking about
big C church.
For us heathens, for us heathens, like big C church, meaning like so it would be like the body of Christ, like all believers of Jesus Christ,
in like global church. So like my experience is limited to the church in the West. However, I look at that lens of the church and go, yeah, globally, this is how I feel the church is supposed to be. So all that to say, when the church is being who she's supposed to be, which is as close to a portrait of Christ as she can be, she is, or when she's at least striving to be that earnestly, she is the most, to me, the most beautiful organization on planet Earth. I'm even
she bad.
Even with my love and infatuation for hip hop culture, which at times is more dominant in my heart than church, I still just, the church is still my first loyalty, my first allegiance, my first love. Now, in my time here and time spent in the last 29 years, I've actually abandoned the church out of hatred and how she's related to like secular culture, art culture, hip hop culture, but she is indeed my first allegiance. So I think she's the most beautiful thing on planet Earth, the most beautiful organization. And so that's where I stand as I now delve into the reason why we're doing this particular discussion and conversation, which is this. It's October 4th, 2020. We've had COVID, we've had social upheaval, we've had an election year. There's been so much social tension and grief on a global level, and then specifically on a national level for Americans that's been placed upon us as Americans, more so specifically, even heavier upon the Black community in America. And so in the past 10 months, I watched as Black people were paraded across social media platforms and the internet and TVs as like, almost as if it was like for our entertainment and nightly news escapism to see Black people getting killed. And so as someone who holds the views that I hold on church, mind you, my views and my experiences of church are very limited to white evangelicalism. Those are the cultures that I came from. Those are the traditions that I was raised in. Those are the teachings and the education, the higher education, bachelor's degree, Bible college degree that I come from. I come from predominantly white evangelical spaces. So as these things were taking place, specifically to the Black community in America, I sat back and watched the church, who every week has a pulpit, has a message, has an intent, has a motivation, has an agenda. And thankfully for once, one or two, three or four, couple of popular white head figures popped their head up and said, Black Lives Matter, and said, this isn't right. and called out their specific congregations. But the vast majority and the vast sentiment still was amongst white evangelical culture. Felt timid, felt a little, this is awkward, this is, even if I'm not ashamed, I really don't, this is something, the sentiment that I felt from white evangelicalism in America was, this is something as a white pastor with a very large congregation, I can afford to ignore and wait until the storm passes. Mm. I say that because my experience with white evangelicalism in the West is one where they use hip hop music in their youth services. They use hip hop cultural references, whether it's in their sermons, whether it's speaking the way Kevin Hart speaks as a comedian, and you see there's so many references to black and churches and pastors see it in their youth. Hip hop culture is pop culture, and it dominates pop culture across the globe. So you'll see pastors make references and use the music and capitalize by way of referencing and sourcing hip hop almost as a form of relevance and connection to culture and to youth. They'll capitalize off of hip hop culture, which at the time when it was happening, no harm, no foul. I get it. I see the agenda. I see the angle. Do what you need to do. My issue came when that same grouping of white evangelicalism thought they could be quiet, thought they could sit on the sidelines, thought they could wait until the storm passed. Let me know, oh, this is no different than when one country like colonial Britain walked into another country like China or like India or like Africa or like Southern America or Spain with the conquistadors in Southern America. You come in and you pillage, you take advantage of, and you capitalize from, and you benefit from, and you advance from, and you build your country off of the wealth, the resource, the beauty, the culture, and the knowledge of another outside entity that you didn't help build. And then when it comes to sharing the plight, the hardships, the downfalls, the hurtings, the cryings, the groanings, the deaths, the sicknesses of that culture, of that country, you want no parts. And in that specific statement is where I took issue. I sat back as a kid who is Puerto Rican and Korean, who belongs neither to white or black culture. I don't even fully belong to Puerto Rican or Korean culture. I'm this enigma where no one fully embraces or accepts me. However, thank you. However, because of how much hip hop culture raised me, the necklace that I'm wearing right now, stylistically, is a Miami Cuban League necklace. I only got this necklace because of hip hop culture. This other necklace is a Jesus piece. I got that because of hip hop. This sweater that I'm wearing makes me reminiscent of the clothing lines Kanye West puts out. That's hip hop. So many cues and the shoes, me only wearing Adidas, Run DMC or Kanye West. The music, there's so much about my life that was shaped and molded and birthed and nurtured by hip hop. And so although I'm not black, and although I am a guest and a visitor and an immigrant and a foreigner in the house of hip hop, she next to the church is next to the church, the most beautiful woman I've ever seen on this planet. So when I looked at the church and I saw how much she wanted to benefit from hip hop, which is a child of black culture, and wanted to use that child to build congregations or build youth services or build their sermons or XYZ, wanted to benefit off the child of hip hop, of black culture, but then wanted to be a bystander, a person in the room, in the back of the room, a silence, a presence of silence, because we felt it. We felt the silence. It tore my heart apart. It made me sick to my stomach. And it made me understand what I always accused the church of in my mind that I never said, which is your pulpit, church in America, your pulpit lacks integrity. because you care more about the people in your congregation whose money funds your staff, funds your building, funds your services, funds your resources. You care more about maybe saying something that a racist, bigoted person in your church wouldn't like. You care more about their money and their pockets and their person in your seat than you do about the humanity of Black people in this country. And I sit here and I read the Bible and I go, Jesus is eating with tax collectors. He's touching lepers. He's hanging out with prostitutes. He's sitting with a woman who, for all intents and purposes, she may have been a prostitute. She may not have been, but was running through several men. She was doing all of these things that amongst the religious circles was taboo, was unacceptable, was condemnable, would actually have gotten him kicked out of the temple. Back in that day, what Jesus was doing warranted him not being allowed to come into the Jewish temple to practice services, to practice rituals, to practice ceremonies. He was getting touched by a leper by Judaic law, would have been considered unclean and therefore not allowed to participate in Jewish rituals and ceremonies. That's the extent to which God in the form of man, according to my faith structure, my worldview, that's the extent to which he drew himself in order to actually go after the downtrodden, the poor, the oppressed, the hurting. And so I see this strange parallel in our culture of, wow, if you're honest, the most oppressed, the most downtrodden, the most grieved, sorrowful person's people group identity in America is Black people. So what a beautiful moment. The church has an opportunity to act like Jesus, come alongside, get into the nitty gritty. Because there's this weird little thing that I've been hearing pastors say where Jesus isn't Democrat or Republican. He exists above it all. And I'm trying to get my church to understand that as a church.
No, Jesus was a NRA card-carrying Republican of the Reagan tradition, to be clear.
So there's this weird thing, right, where they're almost as if pastors are trying to get their churches to be like uninvolved or outside the culture or not tainted by secular world, and we can exist above it. We don't have to get involved in the mix and the rabble and I look at Jesus and I go, that wasn't Jesus of the scriptures. Jesus of the scriptures was calling a Samaritan people who by ethnicity were looked down upon and considered taboo and scandalous by the Jews. Jesus was hanging out with tax collectors, a people who were, again, looked down upon and looked ill upon and scandalous to the Jews. Jesus was hanging out with prostitutes and pimps, and every single social identity in that time that would have been considered scandalous and offensive to the Jews, Jesus came alongside and was like, the Good Samaritan. And I'm eating with the tax collectors, and I'm praising this woman who's a prostitute. And I'm sitting alongside, because she cleaned my feet and anointed my body for death. And I'm sitting alongside this woman at the well who's slept with multiple men, and the man she's living with now. So I sat there and thought, here's a beautiful moment for the church in the West to act like the church should, which is a portrait of Jesus. And they didn't. And as a member and a beneficiary of church, white evangelical community, I sat back and the only logical conclusion I came to was, there's a cancer inside of you. You're more motivated by money than you are by Jesus. You're afraid of your people more than you fear God. And in every fathomable way in which you could, again, when Jesus goes, when you come to me at the end, and I go, you don't belong here because when you saw me thirsty, you didn't give me water to drink. When you saw me naked and you didn't clothe me. When I was in prison and you didn't come visit me. And the people go, oh, when did we see you thirsty or naked or hungry or without shelter? And he goes, when you didn't do it to the least of these, my brothers, you didn't to me. I think in every possible way in which a church could fail to be like Jesus, specifically white evangelicalism in the West, especially in 2020, and it's been going on for years and for decades, of white evangelicalism in the West capitalizing and associating itself in a very weird, strange, separated way with Black culture and hip hop culture and wanting to benefit from it, but not actually be involved in it and be associated with it. And every possible way that the white church, white evangelical church in the West could have dropped the ball of being like Jesus They did. They fumbled it, and they just pressed on with their message, and they're still sitting there wanting people to come to their church, wanting people to tithe to their churches, wanting people to invite their friends, wanting people to promote their messages on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And you want to build your agenda, and you want to build your church, and you want to save the world. And yet you saw, at least in the West, the world, Black people, a chance, a person, a people group hurting and dying and being murdered. You turned your eyes, and whether politically or whether socially, maybe you just sat there and sided with cops, or you sided with Republicans, or you sided with Trump, nonetheless. Or maybe you didn't side with any of it, but the silence was enough to go, you dropped the ball. If definition of sin is falling short, you fell short.
I guess to broaden this too, because I feel like the idea of like the church dropping the ball in this moment, like, is like a in-group discussion and extend. And I know we were clear that we want to be on the outside throwing stones, but I think for people that aren't a part of the church or don't even really understand like Christian culture, that the idea of the church dropping the ball in this moment has ramifications beyond just the church, right? Like the vast majority of the people in the US are like, the vast majority are still religious. And I think it's like overwhelmingly, I've seen like 60 to 70% are specifically Christian. Yeah. So this has like very real implications outside of it. And I think not just in like a material sense, but also like culture and the conversation, which like, again, like it impacts people outside of the church. So I think trying to interrogate where the church is today and the role, while having like a shout out to our last episode, like while having empathy and keeping the church humanized and understanding that worldviews are all different, but you know, we all have religion or religious type beliefs. Like, I think it's important that for those that aren't a part of the church to engage in these conversations, to listen, but to also engage with it, as opposed to, I think, what you see, like, especially online, right? Like a very dehumanizing and like almost, and I'm not doing a false equivalency, like, to be very clear, but almost in the way that the church wants to like kind of just be hands off with this conversation. Like, it's easy to ignore the church and just be like hands off with the inner workings of the church. Like, yeah, speaking of, but it's easy for those outside the church to feel like this is just like an in-group issue. It doesn't even matter. Maybe you don't like church, but I think if you're investing in the fellow humans in your society, you have to engage with their worldview. So I guess just to broaden it, because again, I'm not Christian. So at some point, like, some of the like the form of the discussion, like, won't necessarily resonate with me, right? But I think there's just an urgency, and again, just understanding the people that we share society with, including our loved ones, like Kevin, who has like a arguably much different worldview than me. So just want to kind of broaden it as well for people that might listen and aren't Christian. Yeah,
and let me say, like, Vince is absolutely right, because as a non-Christian, if you're hearing what I'm saying and you're going, well, that sounds all good and everything, but how does that actually pertain to me? It pertains to you because Jewish, what are they called? They're not called temples. Jewish people, synagogues. Jewish persons, they don't evangelize. Christians evangelize. So where you are, if there's a church there, white evangelical, they want to go into your communities. They're going under the guise, not the necessarily guise is a strange word, but yeah, the guise and under the agenda and under the banner of, we're here to serve, we're here to help. We want to seek out the needs of the community. And so the reason this pertains to you is because to a certain extent, a church is supposed to look at the culture, see what the secular culture is saying about them. If there are critiques to be made, take those critiques into serious consideration with gravity and adjust accordingly, course correct accordingly. Because if you're a church and you live in a community and the community goes, we don't care because XYZ, you want to host your little fun youth parties, you want to hand out Coca-Cola and hot dogs, but you actually don't want to get into the trenches and the hurting places of our. So as a,
I'm sorry, you can't love the world as a Christian if you're giving out fucking Coca-Cola and hot dogs.
Damn. Well, I'm just kidding. Let me.
That's why I deconstructed my faith. You offer me a fucking hot dog.
The last straw was when he got that hot dog.
But you better give me some lobster or something.
Too much.
Yo, let me add on to that. Because if you're a church, you can't love people handing out hot dogs and Coca-Colas and then grow into a fucking coward when George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor get murdered and you don't say anything. I don't care what your political affiliation is. A human being lost their life at the hands of brutality and murder. And because there's this strange thing where people don't want to speak truth to power when it comes to police, they just shut up and they get quiet. And it's going to offend our base and our congregation. And what if we, no, your job isn't to appease cops and bigots and Republicans. Your job is to love the world and to serve the needs of the community. So you can't serve the needs of the community coming into that community, serving hot dogs and Coca-Cola. And then when George Floyd gets murdered, you grow silent. And that's not what you're allowed to do as a Christian or as a church in the community. So Vince is right. Like, as a community, you're supposed to sit there and go, we don't care. And these are your issues. We see you out here handing out your Coca-Colas and your hot dogs. Hey, how about these issues that mean something to us as a Latin community, as an Asian community, as an Indian community, Indian is Asian, as a Middle Eastern community, as a Russian community, as a Black community. How about you don't assume what needs might be, like I want a Coke on a Saturday? How about you intelligently assess what is going on in my identity as a Black American, as an Indian American, as a Russian American in this country? And if there's something political and social going on in the landscape, how about you actually show some empathy, come alongside me, even if it gets you in trouble with your base and your congregation, and let me know that you're for me.
Yeah, now you're steering it toward a conversation that, you know, what you're saying brings to mind. As you were talking about, you're basically talking about how the church should have reacted, right? Like, but I'm thinking, like, with your metaphorical comparison to like colonialism, right? So like coming in, taking advantage of a people, utilizing their resources, their knowledge, their land, whatever, and then refusing to care.
Having the gall.
Well, but I think back it up even further, like, don't fucking come and colonize people in the first place. Like, forget about how you should react because you got to benefit from them. Don't treat people, don't treat culture, don't treat minority groups as resources for you to benefit yourself. Like, I don't think the church, I'm not mad, and, you know, and as someone, but I have investment, obviously. I have people I love, like, and I am not interested in sitting over here just being angry at the church, like, at all. But one critique I would have is not their response. It's the whole thing. It's like, you shouldn't have even been in the position to where people can turn around and say, hey, you've been benefiting off of Black culture all this time. How are you going to be silent now? And why did that happen? Because white evangelical Christianity came in treating themselves as essentially Jesus, in the sense of, we have something that you need. We're the source of truth. So of course, the only relationship we're going to have to you is one of teaching, one of we are above, you are to receive. And then anything that we can get from you, we will use to further our version of what we think creating good in society is.
For sure.
As opposed to coming into a community, getting to know the people that make up the community, and building toward what good looks like together. And I think that in itself, I mean, I'm curious what you guys think. Like, I'm like, okay, so how much does that match Jesus's model? Because while I don't think Jesus came in and like acted the way that white evangelical Christians act today, I'm wondering how much of that is just tied into the fundamental idea of like an institution based on the idea that they are the sacred keepers of the one truth. And, you know, of course, like as organizations and institutions grow, okay, you have one man who came on earth and said, I'm the Son of God. I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? And then here we are in 2020, right? Like, so many people, so many churches, like, how could you, but essentially a lot of white evangelical churches function as essentially like they are Jesus, right? Like, so how could they not sort of interact with the communities in a hierarchical, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, but where it's sort of not condescending, but like you're this magnanimous, like, I'm giving you something, you know, like I'm giving you something, and therefore
this teacher-student relationship. What I will say, like, there's a part in the scripture, again, I read my Bible. There's a part in the scripture where he's telling them, because in the time of the day, that was kind of the cultural thing for Jewish people to do. Be a student, come under some older men or some more well-learned men and call them rabbi and teacher and father, and we'll be your student and you teach us. And Jesus comes along and goes, hey, cut all that rabbi shit out. Cut all that father shit out. Cut that shit out. Don't call
I
no
think that
one
was
rabbi.
like cultural, like broadly, right? Not just Jewish in that time, right? Like I'm thinking
Well, no,
like
that's
that kind of like mentor relationship, especially, I don't know, I'm thinking just like the whole stereotypical Roman mentor type thing.
Well, that's the thing. It might have been. I didn't really see it. I don't know if it was present in Roman or Greek or Greco-Roman cultures, but specifically in Jewish culture, rabbi is a very specific word, right, for a Jewish connotation. And so he's speaking to his disciples, some of which are Jews or all of which are Jews, and he's going, hey, don't call each other rabbi. The one amongst you who serves is the great. You have no rabbi, you have no teacher, you have no father except God in heaven. Why do you call me good? No, look to God in heaven. And as a matter of fact, those of you who want to be great, who want to be like this idea of being the greatest and being elevated and being pedestal amongst your brothers, if you want to be that in my economy, guess who gets to be that? The one who serves first, the one who gives first, the one who washes feet, the one who doesn't sit at the high place at the table, the one who doesn't. So his teachings are very servant. Come along, come underneath. If you're going to be someone of honor, if you're going to be a person, not of status, but of honor and respect and prestige and regality, the way you do it in my economy and in my kingdom is you come underneath. Which, Leslie, going back to your point, you're very right. Churches approach with this idea of let me level this dynamic between us so I can be above and you can be beneath, and you can always rely on.
I think most churches try to do that.
Well, no, you're right. It's in the fabric of the DNA, yeah. Right? So the actual, at least what I think the actual template should be or should have been and can be is you equip, you resource. Hey, we're going to come into this place where all we're going to give you is the truth of the gospel. If you don't accept it, good, we'll be on our way. If you do accept it and we believe in according to our religious worldview, there's a conversion experience. From that point, we raise up, we resource. If you want to learn how to do leadership, then we'll try to give you the tools and the resources and the knowledge that we think we've succeeded by. And if not, we can give you at least some general enough level of skill acquisition, of resource, of money, and we'll just resource you. But it has to be your own people who are leaders, your own people who are pastors, your own people who are elders. It has to be your people who are innate and of the culture and of the community, rather than it's a black church with a white pastor, or a Korean church with a white pastor, or an ethnic minority church with a white, it's like, and with white elders but that's how I think Jesus templated it. And you're right, just in especially with white Western evangelicalism, there's a very hierarchical aspect where it turns into like an imitation of corporate America. So you're right, that's very much so a reality.
I think it's so interesting. There's like an argument for theists that is like the whole morality argument, like the idea like without having like some sort of theistic dogma, where is morality going to come from? Which in principle, like obviously I would push back on pretty heavily. But it's interesting that those that do adhere to that kind of concept that you need, especially Christians that feel like, without the Bible, we're going to go into this like amoral, evil society. That implies that as a group that you're pushing the bounds of morality to what is most moral, and to do that like inherently is uncomfortable because you have to stick your neck out and say, hey, like, no, we're not caring about these groups of people the way that we should be. I think and I don't want to preface this with like I'm not trying to throw stones, but hopefully that's clear by now.
Throw stones.
Of this episode.
Yeah, I don't want to throw stones. I'm done saying that. Again, like my family, my friends, but it's like how much of a condemnation of people that think that but aren't willing to be actually physically at the front lines of pushing morality, and a morality that says that every life matters equally. And I think it's like a sick irony to see that there is a priority of being comfortable and feeling morally right, as opposed to being uncomfortable and pushing the boundaries of morality towards a more egalitarian society. Similarly, I think to Leslie's point, it's that same hesitancy to be uncomfortable that makes them as a group, like the church broadly, be very uncomfortable with really looking at their own history and their own role in history, and at least in the things that make them uncomfortable. And if you do that, that's how you see those patterns of like a colonial pattern of going into communities and extracting what you need for them, whether in the sense of like
what they need.
and,
Right?
and
Instead of like
yes,
telling them, oh, you have, well, here's how to solve it without any knowledge of like your community.
literally, yes. And I wasn't trying to make this about, I'm not trying to get on my fucking
Nah,
imperialism,
go,
colonialism,
go, go.
but no, literally, yes, right? Think of like going as a colonial force, right? And not even just America, let's say with the Netherlands, going to Africa, setting up extractive infrastructure to take resources, and then today going and giving them credit to say, hey, like you have a crumbling infrastructure here, we'll help you build up your markets when you set up these markets in an extractive way. And it's the same, I know that sounds like not related to modern church, but it's that same relationship that you would see as a pattern if you were willing to really interrogate your own history and the role that you've played in imperialism, in colonialism. And I think it's coming down to just not wanting to be uncomfortable, because you have to really just be honest with where you've been. And to be fair, also maybe some ignorance, right? Like you don't learn about the role that the church has played, and that there were quite literally Confederate branches, literally white supremacist branches of the church, and that had power, right? Like these weren't just like on the edges of the church, right? And that's not to say that the church is inherently racist or like inherently white supremacist, or that it has to operate that way. But it is to say, like, you have to be willing to make sure that you've completely exercised the remnants of that, the history of that. And I just think that despite the idea that this is the beacons of morality, there's an unwillingness to really be honest with those conversations. And that's frustrating to see.
Well, and what interrogating your morality and pushing for like a better morality, that's a bad phrasing, but like what that actually looks like. Because the thing is, I feel like these words would slide off of 2018 Leslie, who was still a Christian and very invested. Because I would think, like, I would totally agree, you know, in 2018 Leslie was very much like, you know, horrified by how 2016 played out and how Christians reacted to Trump's election, how they reacted to Black Lives Matter being spotlighted, you know, so much negative backlash, so much immediate condemnation instead of any attempt to listen to what, you know, to what people are saying they're protesting about. But it's still, in a sense, I would have been like, no, we do interrogate our moral. Like, we do agree all lives matter. We just disagree. Like, well, actually not we. I would say, you know, people who are very much ruffled by Black Lives Matter, they think all lives matter. They just think that, like, that way isn't, you know, isn't right. And again, it's that same exact thing. It's like, they don't think that that's the way. Like, it's a movement rising up of the people who are actually oppressed. And they're saying, hey, this is the issue and this is how we want to start building the groundswell energy to address it. And then white evangelicals, or, you know, people participating in that culture, no matter what the race, are like, that's not the right way. You know, it's like, what? Like, so it's that too. And it's also, like Vince brought up, education. You know, I feel like we just really get comfortable in the church, speaking as someone who's in the church for so long, treating it, morality, as more like, well, conceptually, rather than like, no, to push for more morality and to push for a clean vision of that, it requires you to educate yourself. Like
Yes.
it isn't just having ideals. It's looking at, okay, how have people with my ideals or purported ideals, how has them taking concrete actions actually played out? And so people, you know, who have my purported ideals have done some heinous stuff in the name of Jesus and, you know, within a Christian pathway. And so it's not enough to say, yeah, like, we think all lives do matter. No, it's like, well, people have said that before and here's what's gone down. So, like, let's examine what's the structures that have to arise from different ideals, and what do those structures have to be informed by historically, and looking at the present situation, and just really not even just educating yourself on history, but, like, again, listening to the people who are actually affected by whatever issue you're saying you care about, you know, like listening, and that's it, you know, and then start like not listening with a framework of like, which I see, right? Like, and which is where you get, I think, like Candace Owens. Like,
Ugh.
okay, I'll listen to a Black person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you have
yeah.
Candace Owens, right? Like speaking directly to
And then telling the demographic, the overwhelming demographic that disagrees with Candace Owens, how dare you not listen to Candace Owens?
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
No, there's this funny game that white uncomfortable people, white Christian evangelical uncomfortable people play, where they're gonna find any Black person who spews the rhetoric and the narrative that fits their ideology, and then go, look, I'm not. Look, I have a Black friend. Look, my cousin married a Black girl. I'm not. It's like, go fuck yourself. Also, let me just add one little caveat to what Leslie was saying, like this whole all lives matter and refusal to say Black lives matter. There's a moment in the scriptures where Jesus is talking to a woman, and he specifically
Oh, and real quick, I'm sorry, just to
No,
clarify
you're good.
before getting forward, I was saying people who believe all lives matter, as in they believe Black lives, as in like not in the way that it's used. To,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, people who genuinely think they do believe all lives matter in the true sense, meaning that of course you believe Black lives matter, and of course you recognize when they're not being treated as such.
And can say it explicitly. It's funny because I didn't think about this until you said it. There are several instances in which Jesus explicitly states in his ministry and time on earth that he's prioritizing initially in his ministry the Jewish community. So think about that for a second. There's Roman occupation. There's a Greco-Roman culture. In that time, even though the Jews were the religious elite, they were the social oppressed. And what does Jesus countlessly, time and time again, reiterate during his early stages of ministry? I'm here for the Jew first and then the Gentile. Because even in this time, there is a social, what's the deficit that the Jews hold because the Romans are occupying their land. And additionally, throughout their history, whether it was in Egypt or in other places, the Jews were the lesser than, the oppressed. And so
Jesus said, Jews' lives matter.
Jesus said, Jewish lives matter, oppressed lives matter, socially deficit lives matter, disenfranchised. So it's just funny how, again, I think the majority of Christians who don't want to say Black Lives Matter, I think the majority of Christians don't read the Bible, period. But I think especially the ones who don't want to say Black Lives Matter, I laugh and I go, oh, you don't believe in Jesus and you don't love Jesus. You love this social game we're playing where we come into a building, we call it church, we raise our hands, you belong to a community of people, and so you get to have belonging and community and resource. Stop. It's cool. I get it. There's Boy Scouts, there's YMCA, there's AA meetings, there's book clubs. You like being a part of community. Don't say you love Jesus and you know Jesus and you understand Jesus, because when I look at Jesus in the scriptures, those sentiments were very much so Jewish lives matter first in this instance because there is a priority and an agenda here. So in the same way, anyone who has an issue with saying Black lives matter, I'm looking at it going, oh, you don't know you don't know Jesus. You don't commune with Jesus. You don't spend time in that Bible. You don't pray. You don't have a ongoing, ever-growing, critical, I need to change me, not the Bible. I don't need to flip scripture and try to like bend it to my interpretation. I need to figure out how I can become more like Jesus. You don't have that sort of relationship, and you're clearly not letting scripture read. You're reading scripture and changing it. You're not letting scripture read you, because if you did, you would see who Jesus clearly is, and you don't if you look at Black Lives Matter and go, I can't say that statement, because very much so throughout Jesus' entire ministry, whether it was through Jews, whether it was through poor people, orphans, widows, prostitutes, pimps, he very much so would focus on a specific group and show through his actions and through his speech, this specific people group right now matters to me more than you, because there's an agenda here about their disenfranchisement or their marginalization or their oppression or their occupation, and they need to be focused on right now for this time being.
Well, yeah, I don't think the Black Lives Matter movement is saying Black Lives Matter more than it. And I know you.
No. I'm
but
saying
the amount of attention, energy, focus, and resources applied to make it so that, you know, whatever group, like you're saying, like in Jesus' time, whatever group is not being treated equally as the rest, of course it's going to take a different amount of energy and attention and resources to level that out. But being honest, I feel like the whole thing of like getting mad at Christians who won't say the words Black Lives Matter, it reminds me of like the everyone freaking out about in the debate this week, Trump refusing to condemn white supremacy when he was asked point blank. And I was like, I mean, yes, it was like horrifying, but it was also like, we shouldn't, like, why are we being, like, why are people acting surprised? Like, he's been telling us this, he's been showing us this. Like, I think it's kind of annoying how much people harped on that, because, and you know, if but just because it was
point.
like, okay, what if he had done it? Did that suddenly fix everything?
Yeah.
Like, is that what you care about? Is someone saying Black Lives Matter? Someone saying, oh yeah, I guess I can say white supremacists are bad, and you know, like.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, most liberals, they do care about the spectacle more than substance. So I do think that, like, is for a significant group of liberals in power, that is like sufficient to prove that you're not a white supremacist.
That's
Yeah,
the
and
funny.
it's very disheartening. It's like, wow, what if he had said, yes, I condemn then? Then the conservative, what if
CNN headline, and like Trump is
Yes, and
clearly
it's
at the forefront of fighting racism.
insane. Yeah, like it's insane, because literally the reality would not be any different no matter what he had said. I mean, unless maybe he had done an even more extreme call to, like, like, you know, if he had just been like, no, I won't condemn it, and also everybody get your guns and get ready, you know.
Raise on up, brothers.
Well, there is something to be said about, like, no, if he would have, like, which he would never say, if he'd have got up there and said some shit like fuck the KKK and fuck like white supremacists and fuck, like, there is something to say about, yeah, if you say those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you feel them. Most time, if you don't feel them and you're saying them, you're trying to bend it for your own agenda and intention, like ulterior motives. But with people who are in positions who need support, like Trump, saying those things does detract a base of your support. Like, there is Eminem. He made a freestyle, not denouncing Trump, but basically going like, fuck Trump. He admittedly came out later in interviews or in whatever, or in songs, and said, I saw a numerical decrease in my numbers, whether it was through views, listens, money, whatever. He had an actual hit to his career because he came out. So there's a game being played. The corporate, powerful people know. The reason rhetoric is so important, the reason that person, and you're right, Leslie, because Trump could still be a racist and say, I condemn white supremacists. But there is also a game that the moderator and Trump and Biden, anyone who's powerful and who does media and who needs public support, knows your rhetoric can either garner a fan base or it can lose you a fan base. And so although it doesn't necessarily, although it's not an indication of internally who you are, they know there is commerce, there is a social accruance, a social currency that I have based on what I say. Why would I ever jeopardize that on the stage in front of you? I'm not stupid. Condemn white supremacists. Those are some of the people are out there in Alabama and Florida and Mississippi and Tennessee with flags of saying my name on it. Why would I? Are you crazy? I got money from those supporters. I got votes from those supporters. I got rallying and are you crazy? No. So yes, Trump could have said that, and it doesn't necessarily mean he's not racist or he doesn't like, or he denounces white supremacists. But anyone who's powerful, corporate, and wealthy and rich knows, especially in the political game, my rhetoric can have a direct correlation between my numbers. And so I have to play this game. And so of course he's not going to say it. And even if he did say it, again, like Leslie's saying, it doesn't mean he's not racist, but he doesn't say it because he knows I can dissuade and lose a lot of people if I say some shit like that. And a lot of them fuck with me. I need numbers in this election. I don't care if it's racist in numbers or not. I just need numbers. So I'm not going to say that shit because it would significantly decrease my numbers.
I think it's interesting how, kind of on the note like Eminem, hip hop, and then us dancing and meeting via dance at church, just how eager I feel like, and this isn't everyone, I'm prefacing everything so I don't get burned at the stake. But it's so easy for us to have been given so much clout. Like arguably we were very cool. Like there was a certain level of like coolness and legitimacy that the church extracted from us for its own benefit without really wanting to engage with the culture that we were providing or that we were coming from in our perspective and our lived experience. And they're so eager.
What are you talking about? Because I don't think we've explicitly said. You say we.
So there's a secret that we've been hiding. No, it's not a secret. So I mean, we were on like
on the last pod, yeah.
I think Leslie might have mentioned it, that we all dance kind of like a worship praise dance team, but very much
Modern.
inspired by like hip hop, like jazz funk, and like the Janet Jackson flavor of art. And the church was so eager and excited to use us to provide legitimacy, to provide the facade of multiculturalism. And yet, some of those same people that probably thought it was just so cool and hip really refused to engage with Black Lives Matter, but just the culture at large, right? Like it's kind of like the tweet, which I'm not necessarily co-signing because I can't speak to it, but it's like the tweet of how easily vilified like Beyonce is, and some of her imagery is like casted as satanic, even though it's drawing on like indigenous and African symbolism. But so eager, like if we had came and did like a Beyonce Christian cover song, like turning fucking, I don't know,
Eliminating the holy water.
eliminating the holy water, single ladies into like pure saving to marriage ladies, they would have been so eager and happy to have us on stage dancing like, you know, the little entertainment providers that we are. And yet there's no real urgency even this time to engage with the culture that it comes from. I mean that's it. Like I don't, it's frustrating. It's just like, to me it's like, wow, like the gall, I don't know, like how dare you? The audacity.
Question: did you guys feel like you were aware of that dynamic while we were in it? Because honestly, I never thought of us as like, oh, we're so like, you know, there's so many, we're so diverse, we're so like, I literally never even thought of it.
I didn't know until the internship. When I got, and Leslie, I told both of you guys this. When I got into the internship, I got closer into the office spaces. I got closer around the staff, the pastors, the elders, and I just noticed there was, number one, because specific, we won't mention the name, but specific to the church experience that me, Vince, and Leslie all had specifically within that culture.
Love the specifics.
Specifically to them, within that culture, and within a lot of cultures, within my Air Force culture, within my current unit in Florida, within almost virtually every culture that I've ever existed in, there is a tolerance for the devaluing of ethnic minority persons, specifically most of all Black persons. There is a tolerance, there's almost a specific social engineering of devaluing, of making fun of, making look less than Black people, making them look subjugated, making them look like they're somehow lessons. Like it's still there in the fabric. It's still there in the connotations of how you speak to people, of how you refer to people when they're not in the room, of what positions you put them in. And so I got into the internship and I started looking. Now, not everybody. I'll say this right now. Sean, with the
at this church that we all used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So more secrets are.
We have a lot of back knowledge that I think are too.
Let me.
So more secrets is that not only did we all meet at church, but Kevin and I, subsequently to being on that dance group, joined the church basically full time as interns, working as was basically like youth mini pastors. I don't know what you would call it.
And let me say this specifically right now. The internship director was one of the few people who never made me feel like that. But again, in that culture, there was like you said, Leslie, I didn't notice it when I was on the dance team, but it's because we were just in the culture of the dance team. I wasn't privy to office conversations and office culture. I wasn't privy to being in the aura and the energy of those office spaces and being in office when people are talking and seeing how the white people talk to the Black people and how the Black people are referred to by white interns, and not interns as in us, but like white other staff members who are hanging around doing hospitality or janitorial work. Like there's white janitorial people speaking in a disrespectful way about Black pastors and Black tech people.
Not
and Black
that janitors shouldn't be able to be viewed on an equal level with people.
They shouldn't. But yeah, I'm an elitist. They shouldn't. So
they're essential employees. First of all, let's be clear, they're essential employees that we all should.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the well. So like no, So let me clarify the message that I was trying to get across was in a corporate organization, a janitor has no place speaking about someone who's in a executive level way. No one has any business speaking about any other person in the corporate setting in a disrespectful way. Janitor to janitor, executive to executive, whatever. There shouldn't be no level of speaking down upon, speaking ill upon in a tearing down way. But then
no hierarchy.
Yeah, okay, no higher, but especially coming from an Asian culture, where like there's a respect and there's a greater and honor and respect we put upon the higher ups because they're the ones who like carry this certain mantle and this burden. And if, especially if they were the founders and the creators of this organization, then there's a certain level of like reverence we give to those who paved the ways for us to come into this place. So I see, especially in anyone who's from a church context or listening to this knows, I see this white person who's a janitor making fun of and jest and joking of a black pastor or a black tech person. And I know it's primarily because they're black. And it's cool and it's funny and it's cute when you're not around black people to make black jokes, even in 2020 in white evangelical culture. So all that to say, like, I didn't see it when we were on the Rush Dance team. But when I got into the internship, oh yeah, no. I was like, yeah, this is, it's, I can smell it in here. I can smell, it smells like white in here. It smells like white.
Mayonnaise.
It smells like mayonnaise that's tolerant of devaluing ethnic minorities and more specifically, more intently black persons. And it's just so funny because like even my white pastor now, who I love to death, and I would have put a bullet in someone's brain for him if I had to. He was like, yo, he's like, I talked to some black people in my church and you cape harder for black culture than some black people I know. Like, where does that come from? Where does that, so it's almost strange. And I go, yeah, I get it. I go, hey, listen, maybe that's my Asian side in me, where Asian kids are taught to have a certain level of like respect and reverence for the people who came before them and paved the way for them. When I say hip hop is like this woman who is the most beautiful woman on the planet to me, and I recognize that hip hop is a child of black culture, a very large part of who Kevin Ortiz is as a human being, the good things, the beautiful things, the rap ability, the artistic prowess, the poetic, is directly a consequence of hip hop culture. And so I look and I go, yeah, my cape is on, and I'm on 10,000 soapboxes for hip hop and black culture and black people, because although I'm not black, a lot of who I am today wouldn't be here. And my swag, like, let's be real, like in my swag and my fashion and who I am, and like the shit that the social currencies I'm able to accrue amongst people, and the reasons I'm able to have talent and skill and all this shit, and my confidence and feeling powerful and all these other things, so many things that we can't even psychologically break down today come as a consequence of hip hop culture. And so that's my cape is all the way on for black people in hip hop culture. And that cape needed to be on back in those days.
And again, this isn't at the person that asked you that, who I do respect, but how can you be this group of people that claim to be the beacons of morality, at the forefront of morality, and not always be caping for groups of people, a group of people that's over-policed, like disproportionately incarcerated, disproportionately in poverty, disproportionately lacking access to wealth, to credit? Like, it just blows my mind how certain people just in the same breath claim that morality is rooted in the dogma of the texts that they believe in, aren't at the forefront of fighting for these marginalized groups. It literally blows my mind. And we're just talking about black people right now. Like, let's not go to immigrants or people who are Muslim post 9/11 or queer people. Like, this is just with the black people. It blows my mind just how, or even women, right? Like the extent that white evangelicalism is very much like what would be like machismo, right? Machismo, like very, like, it just blows my mind how the group of people that claim to be the anchor of what is just, what is fair, what is righteous, are hesitant and not at the front lines caping for these groups. And I feel like even if you disagree with me, like politically, that's something that the onus is on you as someone of that group to explain to me why you're not keeping harder. I just can't get around that.
And let me say, because when Vince told me that people in his life were telling him, hey, this ain't gonna get fixed aside from Jesus. And I got people in my church telling me this ain't gonna get fixed, but the gospel is the only thing, and if people ain't got forgiveness ain't gonna. Let me tell you something. As a Christian who's learned, who reads his Bible every 3 months, probably more than the majority of Christians, who's gone to Bible college, who's been in ministry for several years, did 2 internships, has been in church ministry for several years. Let me tell you something. That is the most problematic statement I've ever heard in my life. Number one, as far as I know, could be wrong, apartheid didn't end in Africa because of Jesus and the Bible and because of Christian. And I'll tell you right now, Jeremiah in the Bible, I think it was Jeremiah. God tells him, hey, don't seek your own agenda. Seek the welfare of the city, and through their welfare, you'll get welfare. The problem with Christians going, this ain't gonna get fixed aside from Jesus, is if you're the only conduit for water to come into the city and you're refusing to participate in any other possibility of a conduit, then of course you're not going to be.
What is it not? Sorry, go ahead.
Then you are then now cutting off your own legs, refusing to try to engineer any other possible way for water to flow into that city, for social issues to be resolved. Let me tell you something right now. Many a place in secular marriages, secular relationships, secular workplaces, things get fixed, forgiveness is found. Social dynamics are adjusted and made better for the benefit of those who are marginalized, whether it be women or ethnic minorities, aside from the explicit name and engineering of the ideals of Jesus and the gospel in church. I'm one of the most gospel saturated people I know, because I actually live, breathe, and like eat this shit. And so as someone who lives, breathes, and eats this shit day and night, the most offensive, problematic statement I keep hearing coming out of these white evangelical mouths or church mouths or Christian mouths, that Jesus is the only. You are going to be the problem. Get the fuck out of the way, because if these people don't want your Jesus, they still need social reparations and healing and an ability and a structure in which the advancement, the progression, the equal rights, dignity, and humanity of oppressed, marginalized, lesser than persons in society can come to equal footing. And it can happen. It can happen, and it can happen outside of church, gospel, and Jesus, because there are ways in which the world can just be structured in which that can take place. And it's happened in multiple societies, civilizations, eras of time. And so for you to come along in your little scope of time in 2020 and go, we have the monopoly on truth, and our verdict is that it won't happen outside of Jesus. Go fuck yourself and your arrogance and your white corporate evangelicalism or your churchness and your thinking that like you own something that non-Christians can't own. So all that to say, from the one Christian on this podcast holding my people responsible, do us a favor. If that's your actual like ideology, shut the fuck up, get the fuck out of the way, while people who are actually trying to do something with people who don't want anything to do with your Jesus are actually putting feet to the ground. Get out of our way so we can move faster. Shut the fuck up so we can move faster. Go stand on the side while we actually make things happen, whether or not these people want our Jesus. That doesn't matter. They deserve dignity. They deserve humanity. They deserve an equal social footing in this country, and we can get to it without your church agendas. From the most gospel-saturated person on this podcast.
And conversely, for people that are outside the church, it goes both ways, right? Like, well, to be clear, I never want to tell people that are disenfranchised that, you know, like your pain isn't valid, right? Like at some point you're not obsessed with trying to build bridges, but you're trying to just you know, have a decent life for you and your family. But similarly, I think it's worth saying, like, and this isn't both sides of them, but it is worth saying that, again, like the vast majority of people in our country are religious, the vast majority of that are Christian, and to refuse to understand their perspectives, no matter how visceral the disagreement is, only mutes your ability to really provoke change, right? And
yes,
I think it's worth saying, and again, like just worth at least listening to people that come from the church and getting to a place of mutual understanding, since we all are sharing the same society. Always on my hippie shit.
No, that...
Always on my hippie shit.
Let me say something, like, because I'll just say real quick, Kanye West like says the same thing. He's like been on that very big thing. Like he was like, dog, if we have to all live here, if our kids have to live with each other, if we all, and especially the internet connected all of us. So if you're, to me, because I love Middle Eastern culture, I speak Arabic for a very specific reason. If you're Arabic, if you're Middle Eastern, you mean so much to me and my so what I'm saying is, like, because the internet connected all of us and planes connected all of us, like we more so now have to live with each other than we've ever had to before. So that hippies were right. We have to learn to treat each other in a way that's beneficial for us all, that puts us all on equal footing. That's mattered more now than when it did when the hippies were around, because now the internet put us all in the same room together and we can all see the sufferings of each other. So like, I'm 1000% on board. Like, fuck that. We have to construct and create and engineer a world in which all of us, no matter where you are in the world, or what gender you are, what sexual orientation, what religious affiliation, we can all equally respect and treat each other with dignity. Like, dog, that hippie shit is, hippie is such a disrespectful, offensive, condescending word. That shit is like the truth and like the only way that this shit can function properly. I'm off my soapbox.
And I'll just say, since we all decided to have our little mini opens at the end, that we have to do that in a way that, you know, it's not coming up in this conversation, but in a way that's not extractive and then reactive. That is from the start, not saying, oh, because I've benefited from you, because I've been,
yes,
then I guess I should treat you like
yes.
a human, and then I guess I should thank you, and then like, let's not do that from the start.
Yes.
And, you know, treat each other as, when I invest in you, I'm investing in all of us, not because I'm going to get something in return, but because we are part of a living organism. To push it even further, we're part of like animal kind. We're part of the earth. Like, we're one big ecosystem. So I'm just going to push it way off the deep end and, you know, say that, like, you know,
1000%.
And in other news, last night I had a dream where I was in Star Wars, but also, instead of it being Yoda, it was Gandalf next to me in the spaceship, and Gandalf was a woman.
Hell yeah.
Wait, was she bad?
She wasn't.
Was she a woman with a beard? Hell yeah.
Almost. She looked like Gandalf, and then I looked closer and I was like, oh my God, it's a woman. And then I woke up.
Gandalf could be a woman.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for listening to Bottomless Podcast. That's BTTMLESS. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at the aforementioned arrangement of letters. Thank you for listening.
Bottomless.